If you think playing darts is fun, the definition of fun was quite different back in the day. Wondering how different? Watch this.
I kind of just want to chuck one at it, you know? Here we go. Yeah! Oh!
Not so much fun anymore, right? From lawn darts to kid pajamas made of fire retardants to weed being a symbol of success. Here's a look at some of the crazy things that were pretty normal back in the 1970s, but illegal now. Now let's see how many of you remember these humble pairs of balls which could spell disaster anytime, anywhere. The dangerous fun of clackers. When fidget spinners hit the market, it was instant rage. Small, big black blue, this simple-looking tool that comes in all shapes and sizes isn't just a toy but a tool to deal with anxiety. But back in the day, kids played with an unsuspecting toy that today would give many parents anxiety.
Take a bow.
But back in the day, kids played with clackers. These were two solid acrylic balls attached to a string that you would swing up and down to make a loud clacking sound. The goal was to get them moving as fast as possible, creating a rhythmic noise that made the toy addictive. It seemed harmless at first, but there was a problem. If the balls moved too fast or hit too hard, they would shatter instantly. Plastic shards would fly in every direction, turning a simple toy into a real hazard. Bruises, welts, and cuts were common. Some kids got hit in the face and lost teeth. Others suffered serious eye injuries that required medical attention. Despite this, clackers remained on store shelves because kids loved them. After multiple reports of injuries, the FDA finally stepped in and banned them in 1971. By then, countless children had already been hurt. Today, clackers are rare collectibles, but no one is pushing for their comeback. Modern toy safety laws would never allow something so dangerous to be sold again. Up next, flame retardants in clothing and furniture. Toys were not the only thing harming kids. Even the clothes they wore carried hidden dangers.
Fear of chemical exposure has prompted a local mom to do away with her children's flame retardant pajamas, but is she risking her children's safety?
Throughout the 1970s, manufacturers packed children's pajamas with a chemical called tris, a flame retardant meant to reduce fire risks. On paper, it seemed like a good idea. Fires were a serious danger, and treated fabrics could help prevent burns. The problem was, no one questioned what tris was doing to the body.
These flames, she says, are just too toxic.
They're sleeping in chemicals.
For years, children wore these treated fabrics every night. The chemical was not just sitting on the surface, it was seeping into their skin, getting absorbed into their bodies without anyone realizing the long-term effects. It took until 1977 for researchers to confirm the worst.
The chances of my house burning down at night are far less than the chance of them getting cancer or some other kind of...
The government finally banned tris from children's sleepwear, but the damage was already done. Today, some states have banned certain flame retardants, but traces of them still exist in old furniture that people continue to use. Lawn darts. As if exploding toys and toxic garments were not enough, parents in the 1970s casually handed children metal-tipped projectiles and called it a game. Lawn darts were essentially mini javelins, each weighing around 12 ounces, with a sharp steel tip designed to stick into the ground. The goal was simple: toss them into a plastic ring. The problem? These darts were capable of piercing a human skull. Injuries were frequent, and in some tragic cases, fatal. Despite clear dangers, the game remained popular. It was not until multiple deaths occurred that the government finally took action.
The ban of this toy only to sporting goods stores would presumably help make the point that it is not safe.
In 1988, lawn darts were banned in the US. Safer versions of the game now use soft plastic tips, but the original lawn darts have become collector's items. Some people still seek them out, viewing them as a symbol of a more reckless time. It is hard to believe there was ever a debate over whether giving children weighted metal spears was a good idea.
I'm just brushing up on my judo and enjoying my favorite smoke, pell mell.
Cigarette ads on TV. Turning on the TV in the early 1970s meant being bombarded with cigarette commercials. Advertisers sold smoking as the height of sophistication, using rugged cowboys, glamorous models, and even doctors to convince people that lighting up was not just normal, but aspirational. These ads were everywhere, and their influence was undeniable. The impact was particularly dangerous for young audiences. Tobacco companies deliberately targeted teenagers, using celebrity endorsements and catchy jingles to make smoking look cool. Public health officials began pushing back, and after years of debate, the US government finally banned cigarette ads on TV and radio in 1971. The ban marked a turning point in the fight against smoking. Overnight, one of the tobacco industry's most powerful marketing tools was gone. Smoking rates began to decline, and the way people viewed cigarettes started to change. Looking back, these old ads feel surreal. What was once a symbol of glamour now looks like a recruitment campaign for a death sentence. Of course, tobacco companies did not stop advertising. They just shifted their focus to magazines, billboards, and product placement in films, keeping their influence alive in more subtle ways.
These two men would play pivotal roles in the search for a solution. Midley, a mechanical engineer and chemist, and Kettering, a famed inventor and head of GM's research division.
Leaded gasoline. For decades, every car on the road was spewing lead straight into the air with every mile driven. Leaded gasoline was praised for reducing engine knock and improving performance, but at a massive cost to public health. The toxic fumes were inhaled by millions daily, contributing to neurological damage, lower IQs, and even increased crime rates. The US began phasing out leaded gas in 1973, with a full ban taking effect by 1996. The difference was staggering. Lead levels in children's blood dropped dramatically, and researchers linked the decline to improved cognitive development and lower crime rates. Still, old habits die hard. Some countries continued using leaded gas well into the 21st century, and even today, small aircraft still rely on leaded aviation fuel, though efforts to phase it out are ongoing. Speaking of aircrafts, here's another activity which shouldn't even be talked about on an airplane.
People who smoke pipes and cigars will have to have a section all their own. Some airlines have already done this voluntarily, others will now be forced to.
Smoking on airplanes. Imagine being trapped in a flying metal tube filled with cigarette smoke for hours. That was air travel in the 1970s. Airlines had smoking sections, but separating smokers from non-smokers in an enclosed space worked about as well as having a peeing section in a swimming pool. Passengers had no choice but to breathe in second-hand smoke for the entire flight. The air was thick with the smell of burning tobacco, clinging to clothes and upholstery. Flight attendants had it the worst, forced to work long shifts while inhaling smoke non-stop. Complaints piled up, but the tobacco industry fought back, arguing that banning smoking on planes would violate personal freedom. Public pressure eventually won. The first ban started in the 1980s, with short domestic flights going smoke-free. By the 1990s, restrictions expanded to longer flights, and by 2000, smoking was banned on all US flights. Now, it is prohibited on commercial flights worldwide. Beyond the obvious health benefits, removing open flames from pressurized cabins turned out to be a pretty good idea. Looking back, it is shocking that lighting a cigarette in an oxygen-rich environment was ever considered normal. Speaking of smoking, back then, kids could buy cigarettes. In the 1970s, children did not just pretend to smoke. They could actually buy cigarettes without anyone batting an eye. No age limits, no ID checks, just a simple exchange of cash. Many stores would even sell cigarettes to kids carrying a note from their parents. "Please give my son a pack of Marlboros," was all it took for a child to walk out with a fresh pack. Back then, smoking was so normalized that sending a kid to buy cigarettes was just another errand. But research eventually linked early smoking access to lifelong addiction. Laws began changing, raising the minimum purchase age over time. Today, nobody under 21 can legally buy cigarettes, and retailers who break the rule face hefty fines. What was once a casual childhood chore would now be grounds for a serious investigation. Lead-based paint. It was colorful, long-lasting, and deadly. For decades, lead-based paint was the go-to choice for homes, covering everything from walls to furniture to children's toys. Homeowners loved its smooth finish and bright hues, but no one paid much attention to its toxic effects.
Tell the mother that the baby has been eating paint chips from the walls in the apartment.
Lead poisoning was a slow and silent threat. Kids playing in homes with lead paint would inhale dust or chew on windowsills, absorbing the toxin directly into their bloodstream. It took years before the dangers were fully recognized, and in 1978, the US finally banned lead paint for residential use. But that did not erase the problem. Millions of older homes still contain lead paint, requiring expensive abatement procedures to remove it safely. The effects of lead exposure are irreversible, causing cognitive and developmental issues, particularly in children. The fight against lead poisoning continues today, with strict housing regulations and ongoing efforts to remove this hidden hazard from older buildings. What was once a common household staple is now considered hazardous waste, requiring professional handling and costly removal. Candy cigarettes. For kids in the 1970s, smoking started with sugar. Candy cigarettes were everywhere, letting children mimic adult smokers in the most innocent way possible. The packaging looked just like real cigarette brands, and some even had a paper-wrapped coating that puffed sugar dust when blown on. Parents did not think twice about giving them to their kids. The problem? These candies did more than just satisfy a sweet tooth. They normalized smoking, making it feel like a fun, grown-up activity. Studies later suggested that children who played with candy cigarettes were more likely to become smokers as adults. While candy cigarettes are still legal in the US, they are heavily restricted and banned entirely in countries like Brazil and Ireland. Looking back, it is wild to think that we gave kids a sugary rehearsal for nicotine addiction. It is one of those things that seemed harmless at the time, but in hindsight feels like a terrible idea.
And it allowed children to basically mimic what they saw their parents doing in the kitchen, so they could bake cakes and cookies.
The original Easy Bake Oven. What could go wrong with giving kids a miniature oven? Plenty. The original Easy Bake Oven relied on a 100-watt incandescent bulb to generate heat, reaching temperatures high enough to cause serious burns. Unsuspecting children stuck their hands inside, only to realize too late that they had essentially been given a toy with a built-in fire hazard. Despite its dangerous design, the Easy Bake Oven was a huge hit.
I love my Easy Bake Oven.
It went through several recalls and redesigns over the years, eventually ditching the bulb for safer heating elements. Today's versions are much less likely to send kids to the emergency room, but they will never match the wild, anything-goes attitude of 70s toys. High school smoking areas. As if candy cigarettes and vending machines weren't enough. By the time kids reached high school, they did not even have to sneak around. Many schools had designated smoking areas where students could light up between classes. Teachers knew, administrators allowed it, and nobody thought twice about the message it sent. Looking back, it is hard to believe that schools, the very places meant to educate kids on healthy choices, actually encouraged smoking by making space for it. But in the 70s, cigarettes were everywhere, and teen smoking was just part of life. Over time, public health campaigns and stricter laws forced a change. Schools started banning smoking entirely, aligning their policies with what we now know about the dangers of tobacco. Today, lighting up on school grounds is unthinkable. And now, time for the ultimate game changer. Cocaine was everywhere. The 1970s had an interesting relationship with cocaine. It was both glamorized and feared. Celebrities, musicians, and even business executives openly indulged, with Hollywood and the music industry embedding cocaine culture into the era's aesthetic. But despite its popularity, the drug was often portrayed negatively in pop music and film. Songs like Cocaine Blues and Casey Jones warned of addiction, violence, and recklessness, while movies like Superfly and Scarface highlighted its destructive consequences. By the late 70s, however, the party was starting to wind down. The growing number of overdoses and arrests made it clear that cocaine was not just a harmless luxury, but a serious epidemic. The drug's grip only tightened in the following decade, leading to the infamous crack cocaine crisis of the 80s, forever changing America's approach to drug policy. That is it for today's video. If you liked this trip down memory lane, make sure to subscribe for more. And what other toy or commodity can you think of to add to the list? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.